here today to do an interview regarding ADHD. So I'll ask my interviewee the first question. That is, can you talk more, like describe your designation and your work in the mental health sector?
Yes, my designation, I am a psychologist. I'm currently working with a clinic which is situated in Kandivali. What have I studied? So I have done my master's in psychology with a clinical specialization. I Right now I'm working as a psychologist, a therapist, and also a diagnostician. We are in tandem with other psychiatrists. We do a lot of testing. We're also working in certain schools where we do testing for children, where the children who can't afford it, the schools that come under Teach for India organization. So yeah.
That sounds really nice, ma'am.
Yeah.
So could you explain us more about what is ADHD?
Okay, so theoretically, I know you all know about what ADHD is, neurodevelopmental disorder, which involves predominantly hyperactivity and impulsivity. This all we know. However, what are the symptoms that you actually see in a child suffering from ADHD is very different from that which we study theoretically. A child suffering from ADHD might seem like an over energetic child as described by the teachers and not a very hyperactive one. He or she might be in a setting where they are just called naughty and all over the place by teachers. And yeah, the hyperactivity that we usually call hyperactivity doesn't come off like that. It's described in various ways by teachers and parents. The inattentiveness that we have theoretically is often described as मैं इंस्ट्रक्शंस देती हूँ वो सुनता नहीं है, वो अपनी मन की करता है, बहुत ही जिद्दी है. And many a times it can be a stubborn child, no doubt, but many a times it's just the inattentiveness of the child coming out like that. So yeah, theoretically we all know what ADHD is, but it comes off very differently when you actually see it in life.
Okay, ma'am. Are there any types of ADHD?
There are. So there are three types. One is predominantly inattentive. The second one is predominantly hyperactivity, impulsivity. And the third one is a combined type, which has a very complex play of all the three symptoms. So, yeah, there are three types.
And how is ADHD usually detected in children?
Okay, so we have different scales that of course, first of all, it comes off with a slight hint from the teachers, class teachers, or parents. And later by diagnosticians or psychologists, clinical psychologists like us, we have different scales to help us come to a conclusive decision whether a child is suffering from ADHD or not. So we have scales such as Vanderbilt, we have scales such as Connors, we have another scale that is, if I think I remember it correctly, it's somewhere like CBCL, Child Behavior Checklist. So yeah, these are three very famous ones, which we use over here to diagnose ADHD.
Okay, ma'am. And how would you say the comparison between rural and urban areas when it comes to detection of ADHD?
Okay, so Sapna, as always, coming with complex questions. So yes, urban and rural. As we see, it often happens that, first of all, let's come to symptoms. Rural symptoms of the kids who are in rural areas, they present symptoms which are very different from them, which the kids in urban areas, of course. When it comes to being diagnosed, Rural areas are far less diagnosed than urban ones. When it comes to the sense of getting the aid even after diagnosing that they have ADHD, rural areas are much lesser given the aid, or even the approach by the children in rural areas is very less towards certain special ed programs or certain aids, special educators, or behavioral therapists. So they don't usually approach these, which is very much required if you're suffering from ADHD.
Yes, ma'am. Even if we like, basically speaking, mental health wise, there is a gap between urban and rural areas when it comes to mental health or anything, even physical health related. So to bridge that gap is very important.
It is very important, and I'm glad that there are so many NGOs which are working in this, and they are actually doing their utmost best to give these resources to children in rural areas.
Okay, ma'am. The next question is, does ADHD change with age?
Ah, does ADHD change with age? So yes, there is a very healthy argument that ADHD wanes with age, that the symptoms of hyperactivity and impulsivity that you see in a child suffering from ADHD kind of dies down as the child matures. However, there is often a very inner restlessness within the child during adolescence or young adults. So, yes, it always prevails, but yes, in a different form.
Okay, ma'am. So, ma'am, does our education system provides any special education program for the children who have been diagnosed with ADHD?
I have not come across any school till now that has a special education program for children suffering with ADHD. I've often heard about learning disability, but ADHD not yet, which is kind of sad, but yeah.
Okay, ma'am. So, what can we as a community do to help like children who are diagnosed with ADHD?
We as a community of mental health, or we as a community of local people?
Both, like even mental health. So we understand, like in mental health, you will learn about ADHD and you'll be more inclined to understand how to help them. But generally, localization, like local people, how can they help or contribute towards it?
Okay, so as a community of local people, I think first of all, getting to know about this disorder or familiarizing yourself with the symptoms of these disorders or how this disorder plays out in children is very important, because often we see that parents see other children who are hyperactive as, something bad is going on with that child. They're often looked with those glasses, which is not nice. We often so I know this is like a nature nurture argument, but yes, someone is suffering from a mental illness, but you can also focus on the good parts of it, right? You can also focus on the child as a child and not as a hyperactive, naughty, disruptive child, right? So yes, familiarizing with the different how ADHD is. I think ADHD, when it's severe, you know it for sure. But when you have ADHD playing out with very moderate kind of symptomology, the children are able to cope in regular classrooms. Okay. Now, when you are in a regular classroom and you're suffering from ADHD, it's very difficult for these children to make friends.
Mhm.
So, how does that make a difference in a child's life when you have friends and when you don't, Sapna? It makes
Yeah,
a great difference. So, exactly. So, I think that parents play a very big role when it comes to this, when they can normalize this with their children and speak about it. I think ADHD children, this children suffering from with ADHD, are much more settled in. They can be themselves around other kids, they don't have to hide it. They can very much play along, they can be their normal selves. The shame, the guilt, all the other things that come with it can really not take place.
Yes. So since we are on a topic of, even parents and them educating their kids to how to treat others, like treat them with kindness, even if they are suffering from any disorder, be it mental or physical. So I would want to ask you, how do parents perceive when their kids are diagnosed with ADHD?
There are different kinds of parents up now. So I have God's grace that I've seen parents which are very accepting of their child suffering from ADHD. They were the ones who saw that there was something different about their children, and they were the ones who approached us at the clinic. And it was nice to see supportive parents. However, yes, it is often heard that a hyperactive, impulsive child is often seen as naughty by their parents. सुनता ही नहीं है मेरी बात को, ये मतलब this is a persistent complaint of the parents. They have this concern that if a child is suffering with ADHD, उनका आगे जाके क्या होगा, because all mental illnesses are seen as a barrier to future careers. So yes, they have this very persistent concern, which they need not have, because ADHD, if you are able to come to a therapist and you are able to, a child is able to understand how to normalize their own hyperactiveness or how to deal with their own impulsivity, they can do well in future. So yeah, as parents, I think they have to be a little more supportive, a little more patient with their children. They have to, yes, they have to come to a role of accepting their child as they are and not comparing them with the other children, because every child is unique in their own way, right?
Yes. Like any illness or disorder shouldn't be considered as a barrier when it comes to education or jobs or anything like that, because even the companies these days are being mindful about learning disabilities, about having counselors at work, be more inclusive of everyone. So the world is changing, we need to change with it.
Absolutely, absolutely, Sapna. Well said.
Yeah. So, ma'am, would you want to share any experience you might have while working with any children who have been diagnosed with ADHD? Any cases you want to share if you're allowed to?
So yes, I've been working in a clinic where we have a couple of children suffering with ADHD coming in, and all of them are very different in their own spheres. So when you say that, how Sapna, you and I have studied psychology, and we often, after studying a particular disorder, we often have those lenses of this has to play out like this. You know, you have
Yeah.
that list in your mind.
Certain checklist, yes.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be like that. So yeah, when you come with a case which is right in front of you, it plays out really differently than that checklist that we have in our minds. We really have to get into the practicality of all the symptoms, and even then, these kids, all three of them have ADHD. One of them is suffering with ADHD and ASD as a comorbidity. So, yeah, they all play out so differently. One of them is a child who is hyperactive, impulsive, but he's not inattentive. So when you ask him to follow instructions, he will make a great effort to follow it. However, it will be really quick and really messy, but he's listening to you.
Okay.
Yeah. So that way, all three of them are are so different, and it is so nice to have them around, and they're the greatest gift of being a psychologist, Sapna, is to see the progress happening in the child. So with every session that you have, and you see that difference in the child, and you realize that, you know what, he's going to be okay in the future. Yeah, that thing just makes you smile.
That is like the brownie points for the work that psychologists do. See their
Absolutely.
patient grow.
Yeah, absolutely. The client grow into a beautiful human being that they are, that they just need to realize.
Yes, ma'am. And for the last question, since you pointed out, I would like to ask, like, what can we as a community, that is people who are, studying psychology or are related to any mental health sector, what we can do to help people who are suffering with ADHD or who are diagnosed with ADHD?
Okay, so there are a lot of things that come out in my mind that we can do. Starting off, like you all are doing a great job interviewing different people from the society as to how they understand ADHD and how ADHD is actually, and putting it out there in the society and letting people know what ADHD is. It's really important for people to understand things with the depth of the disorders, because nowadays it has become a slang, you know, being hyperactive, being depressive, being anxious. All of those things have just become slang words and not used with the depth and seriousness that they should be. So I think that's very important. And other than that, I would really urge you all to go out there, help out in NGOs whenever you have time. Go out to different schools around your area, help in diagnosing if you are a psychologist from clinical specialization, or if you are a counseling psychologist, go there, give them therapy, make them understand, make the teachers understand how ADHD is and how it plays out. It's just not naughtiness, and it cannot be cured with the punishment that they think is useful to cure naughty kids. So yeah, a lot of psychoeducation is expected out of us. Other than that, a lot of social work. I think it is our a responsibility on our shoulders that we should go out there and do those a little bit of extra things just to make the society a better place. And other than that, keep reading, keep updating yourself, because the sky's the limit when it comes to your mind and how it plays out.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. We end the interview here. You have been a great sport. Thank you for, talking to us, agreeing for this interview, and helping our viewers also get the knowledge about ADHD and for spreading awareness.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sapna, for having me.